All right, everyone out there, welcome to the Palmetto Pitstop. This is a new NASCAR podcast. I am Tony. Sitting next to me is Adam, and we are going to be diving into a bunch of NASCAR details. We are from Pennsylvania, but again, here in South Carolina, we are going to be taking you through a nice little realm here overall, and a lot of different factors here. We just got through Michigan. Daytona is in our sights. Adam, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty well. I'm excited to start this new podcast. Just a little insight before we really get into things. Tony, relatively new fan, been in and out of the sport, but really started watching last year. And I, on the other hand, have been watching since about 2007, so 17 years of in-depth watching, about 2 years for Tony.
It's been back and forth for me. I used to be into it as a child, a little bit more when I was a kid because my uncle was a, big Dale Jr. fan. And that was something, of course, that, I loved when he was still alive. Again, God rest his soul, passed away now. But it was something that fell off a little bit with me. But, with inspiration from you and even your mother as well, was a big, Denny Hamlin fan. It's been something that I've really been able to latch on to, especially moving down here in the Carolinas where racing is huge.
Yeah, racing is such a big thing, and it feels like since we've moved down here, it's had so much more of an impact on our everyday life, just enough to influence starting a racing podcast. So I think we can get right into Michigan this past weekend, split, of course, between Sunday, the first stage, and Monday because of the rain. Started at 11 a.m. It felt like two different races, obviously in a figurative and a literal sense. First stage dominated by, at first, Kyle Larson jumped out to a huge lead, and then the Toyotas really started to reel him in. Mm-hmm. Denny Hamlin stayed in that top three. Bubba Wallace just shot out of a cannon.
He looked so good. He looked so good. I know you were hoping for him.
Yeah, on Sunday, it looked like Bubba Wallace, Joe Gibbs, and 2311 guys were really going to be the guys to beat, which they ended up being there at the end. Denny Hamlin, unfortunately, really started the domino effect, so to speak, when Bubba Wallace was leading. He gets aggressive, goes around, brings out the caution. That kind of screws Bubba out of a stage win.
Yeah, it was tough.
Bubba was probably going to end up driving away with his second stage win of the year. He won, I believe, stage 2 back at Indy. So once that stage ended, Ryan Blaney ended up getting out in first. We saw some speed out of the Hendrick guys that they weren't too competitive in Richmond last week. They ended up with 2 top 10 finishers, and the results didn't really show this week for Hendrick, but they got into it, which we'll get into a little later on. But Denny Hamlin's aggression there, I listened to his podcast, and he was talking about how he's just super aggressive against Bubba, and if he had the chance, he'd go back and do it over again, because it screwed his own driver out of a stage win there.
I was going to say, they have that really good relationship, of course, in that sense, and it's tough, when you're out there. We've never been, behind the wheel of a race car, so it's tough to imagine when you're actually out there on the track. Probably a lot of that escapes your brain, even though, who's more of a friend or foe out there on the track. And, it's unfortunate because Bubba doesn't have a win yet. He's very much on that cusp. He is very much Bubbalicious right now on the outside looking in. And we're going to get a little bit more so into that as well. It's going to be a very tight race as we move towards the playoff picture. And, only a couple more to go here.
Yeah, so moving from Sunday, stage 1, to Monday morning, stage 2, when they do pick up racing, it seemed like more of the same. Hamlin, after his spin, wasn't at all the same. He went to the back immediately following the restart. Before they hit the green flag, he went down pit road, went to the tail end, and we really didn't see him the rest of the day until the finish, and he wasn't much of a factor in that. Ended up bringing it home in 8th, I believe, a top 10 finish for him. Which, considering when these cars spin, that flat underbody at a track like Michigan, that can really mess up a day. And we saw that with some incidents later on. We had a weird situation where after the pit stops, the first set of pit stops, I believe, in stage 2, we saw 3 tire blowouts in about a lap that affected Joey Logano, Todd Gilliland, and I believe the 16 of AJ Allmendinger.
I think so. It was active, yeah. It was really crazy just after that restart, all these problems that a lot of cars had.
Yeah, and it wasn't as though tires were an issue all day.
No.
It was just 3 blowouts, brought out a caution, and then that was the last of the tire issues that we saw. But unfortunately, on the restart, everyone's bunched up. Towards the end of stage 2, Kyle Larson just gets loose off of 4. Chase Elliott's right behind Bubba, who, like we said, probably could have won this past week.
He was looking good. He was looking really solid. He's just been, I don't know, a black cloud over his head. Just it cannot seem to get past some of this bad luck.
He's been. I know there are a lot of drivers out there who have had a bad streak of luck. Kyle Busch comes to mind, but I think Bubba Wallace might be one of the unluckiest drivers this season. He's just been in position. I think back to the Daytona 500, he ended up finishing 5th with the caution coming out just as they passed, so they couldn't get a chance at overtime. Maybe he could have done something there after the crash. He had Atlanta, which I think about this race a lot, which already ended with a 3-wide finish.
Yeah, that was such a good finish.
It was.
God. And again, that's when things get a little bit more mainstream. I saw the pictures shared on so many different platforms.
Yeah, it went, without a doubt, the biggest moment of the season.
Viral, you know.
But I think about that last finish because if you rewatch it, while Daniel Suarez, Kyle Busch, and Ryan Blaney are 3 wide, Bubba Wallace looks like he's about to send it 4 wide for the win, which would have made that even crazier.
Yeah. Into
turn 3, he gets super tight, ends up going up the track into, I can't remember if it was Austin Cindric or somebody else, but he ends up gets really tight. And ends up finishing 5th in that race as well. But ever since then, just up and down. He had a good race going at the first visit to Richmond. He gets into Kyle Larson, bring out the late caution for a controversial finish there. And Bubba gets stuck on pit road and 17th place finish there. So he's just had such terrible luck, but 2311's been on a tear.
Oh, they have been.
This whole summer. And Tyler Reddick, but we'll get more into him later. But Bubba, with Kyle Larson spinning out right in front of him, he tries to slow down. Chase Elliott's going full speed behind him. He bumps Bubba into a spinning Kyle, pretty much takes away any chance of Bubba being competitive the rest of the day. And that crash really had some crazy playoff implications because Todd Gilliland was involved. Chris Buescher was involved, and the 17, he won the race last year at Michigan, and he was looking competitive.
Definitely.
He was looking competitive this weekend, too. So, a huge crash at the end of Stage 2, which Kyle Busch ends up winning, and Kyle Busch's race this week, I think, had to be a breath of fresh air for that team.
Yeah, he's had a tough year.
He could definitely be up there with those in terms of bad luck. And RCR as a whole, they've just not been super competitive. We saw what Austin Dillon was willing to do just to have a chance at the playoffs win at Richmond. Kyle Busch, just wrong place, wrong time, but he gets his first stage win since Sonoma of last year. Such a crazy drought for a driver who has been so dominant in the 2010s. It was every race in the 2010s, it felt like Kyle Busch's race.
I mean, you're going to get to a point where you start to see, some kind of drop-off. Obviously, these drivers can race, long, even, into their 40s and just be fine. You're still driving a race car. You need to be, physically fit and, mentally able and in a good capacity. Race car driving is an extremely intense sport, and obviously it takes a lot of mental capacity and great decision-making. But, these guys can hang around a long time. But, you're eventually going to start to see some of the big names, the guys that have won a lot of races or, championships in the past. You got to start to decline at some point, as you do in any sport.
It's a shame because Kyle Busch was just so dominant in that 18 Toyota for Joe Gibbs. So seeing him go to RCR, he won 3 races in the first half of the season in 2023. And then to just be on a dry streak. I mean, he has the record for the most consecutive winning seasons in NASCAR, I believe, and he is at risk of losing that streak this year. I think this past weekend at Michigan proves he still has it. I think he is getting up there in age because he wasn't quite as dominant in the 2020s with the 18.
Yeah, starting to tail off a little bit.
Yes, but I don't think that the running joke, as you want to say, if you want to say it, washed.
Yeah.
For athletes of
Yeah.
his age, I don't think he's close to that. I think he's declined a little. He's lost a step, but I think Kyle Busch, in the right equipment, could probably still be at least a semblance of that dominant driver we saw with him.
Of course. I mean, even people that aren't really into the sport that much still know Kurt and Kyle Busch. It's just, it's a household racing name.
Yeah, especially that 18 M&M Toyota was
of course.
recognizable.
And plenty of commercials,
Yeah,
you've
he
seen
was
it.
everywhere.
You've seen it.
Yeah. Moving into stage 3, that's when the race both mellowed out and also got a little wild, especially with Corey LaJoie. Corey LaJoie's been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons this year. It was announced that he wouldn't be returning to Spire, even though they did grab Rodney Childers from Stewart-Haas Racing, a great crew chief. But they won't be pairing him with him, and he's been getting into it with Kyle Busch, and he had that whole incident at Pocono. And this week, it looked like he was getting into it with Noah Gragson in the 10, and then he just loses it on a straightaway.
Just took air. That car just took flight. It almost seemed like a physical anomaly the way that car just went off the track. It was crazy, and then just did a nice little skid on the roof. Obviously, he was fine. These drivers are very much padded up. These cars are safe as they can be, but still very much a sight to see with the crash.
Yeah, especially at a track like Michigan. I believe I saw a stat where it was the first flip in a Cup Series race, not at Talladega or Daytona, since Brad Keselowski in 2010 when he flipped at Atlanta. But an interesting thing was that we saw a very similar crash in the Xfinity Series on Saturday when I believe it was Kyle Sieg. Same thing, except on the last lap, he just spins. A difference in their crashes is Sieg, his roof flaps, which are meant to keep a car on the ground, they did not deploy.
Okay.
So his car just turns over. He's skidding on his roof down the back straightaway. Corey LaJoie, his roof flaps deploy. Car still catches air. I'm hoping that NASCAR does not overreact to the situation. Denny Hamlin mentioned it on his podcast that they would rather flip than hit the wall.
Yeah, of course.
Which I would agree with.
It's a lot of force when you're hitting the wall. You gotta understand that. And even though it might have looked bad, it very minimal injuries to him, and this is something where you're continuing to go on, and you still got to understand, this is something that's a very rare occurrence, and these guys are still as safe as possible. They want to make sure that they're okay, and hopefully there is not an overreaction here.
Yeah, I don't want to see them bringing a super speedway package like they did with Xfinity. They brought us. The racing was okay in Xfinity. I think the racing was much better, way better, I want to say, in the Cup race. Things seem like they're going pretty well the rest of the race. Kyle Busch looked like he was in line to possibly win this race, win his way into the playoffs. I believe he took an aggressive strategy. He took 2 tires and got out on the straightaway right in front of where the leaders would be once green flag pit stop cycle through. He gets out, blocks William Byron, who's on a charge, and that's going very well for him.
Oh, he was leading for a good little bit there.
For a good while at the end. I was beginning to think that this was it. The drought is over. And then that 23:11 speed shows right back up. Tyler Reddick just...
my guy, Short King, to the front.
He drives right up, right past him, and it looks like this is going to be a clean finish until Martin Truex slaps the wall, and should not have been a caution, should have been a caution. People have been debating it. Brings out the caution. Tyler Reddick, if you listen to his radio, definitely didn't think it should have been a caution.
No, yeah, 45 wasn't happy.
Not at all. Unfortunate for Martin Truex, who, of course, he's retiring from full-time racing after this year. He has 4 second-place finishes at Michigan. Never was able to win there, and unless he decides to come back for Michigan races, it seems like this was the end of his tale with that racetrack. Unfortunate, he was up there like the rest of the Toyotas, but after that slap, he finished in the 20s somewhere.
Yeah, it dropped him back.
At a track like, these cars are tough, but at a track like Michigan, where even in these lower horsepower cars, at least compared to the 2000s, these cars are ripping around this track. They're going 200. I believe there were cars getting into 208 heading into turns, so they're fast, and if you get any kind of damage, we saw it with Bubba Wallace, your car's pace is going to drop off.
It's not, yeah. It's just not sustainable. And even just watching it and getting a little bit more back into NASCAR this year, I'm starting to understand how a lot of these different tracks affect drivers in a lot of different ways.
Yes, absolutely. We saw overtime. We had 2 of them. Ross Chastain looked like he was going to put up a lot of points, taking advantage of that crash with Kyle Larson, where Bubba Wallace, Chris Buescher, all of them get damage. And then on that restart, William Byron surges ahead at the last bit before the second caution, where Ross Chastain spins, gets stuck in the grass, probably still wet from all the rain.
That was big, too.
That was
big because he was really setting himself up nicely to grab some playoff points, so that really hurt him. Helped Bubba, helped a couple other guys, start to level out, but it's going to be a tight race for that 16th spot.
It really is. And then, thankfully, justice, as the saying goes, ball don't lie. I guess in this case, his wheel don't lie. Tyler Reddick is able to take the lead on the next restart, drives away from William Byron, gets the win, finally is able to put a cherry on top of this hot streak.
Yep, number 2.
Yes. Win number 2. An interesting stat I saw. In both races where Tyler Reddick won this year, Corey LaJoie has flipped in both of them. Where he flipped at Talladega, he's now flipped at Michigan. So Corey LaJoie, if Tyler Reddick ends up going on a championship tear, might want to bring a parachute to these next few tracks.
That is an interesting stat. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, but like we said, Tyler Reddick ends up winning, and with that win, he ends up first in the regular season points, which is huge with just 2 more races remaining.
I was going to say, I saw that they were talking about that for a good deal at the end of the broadcast when it was on USA, of course, the day following. Luckily, I was off Monday, so I was able to just sit home on my couch and watch the rest of that race. But it was interesting, just seeing all the drama unfold at the end there, knowing that, oh yeah, Reddick, yes, definitely going to win. But just with all, again, the things that went wrong, that he was just going to go through another little spot of bad luck and that he was maybe going to get second or third, but he got it. They talked about, again, how it really pushes him up. Elliott goes back. So a lot of differing factors here as we're getting just to the nitty-gritty of this race, but he's really in a good position right now.
Yeah, speaking of Elliott, though the finish didn't show it, Hendrick was really up there. Elliott got into it late, I believe on the last lap, got into it with Ryan Blaney, pushed Elliott back in his finish.
Yeah, he really went back. I was going to say, some of that drama, just the last few laps, the race starts, everything after that happened with Truex Jr., it really made things tight at the end. I was just sitting there so frustrated because, again, as you know, even just getting back into it without really knowing too much about the standings, I just kind of latched onto a driver, and luckily for me, Reddick happens to be really good, and I've really taken akin to watching him, loving his personality, bringing out the sun, just love his team, and of course that his teammate's Bubba, so I know he's your guy, so it's really made it really a breath of fresh air watching him, and made it a lot easier picking a good winning driver, because again I really didn't know that he was going to have this kind of success, he was going to be this good. It's just lucking into some good fandom.
Yeah, Tyler Reddick has been on an unreal tear this year. Last year he showed flashes of what he can do. He won 3 races with Richard Childress when he was driving the 8 car before Kyle Busch got there.
Okay.
Tyler Reddick has really developed into somebody that a brand new team like 2311 really needs. They have Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is one of the best, I would say, midfield drivers. He is always, I believe you can count on him for top 10s at a majority of tracks. And he's proven that. Bubba Wallace is developing very well, too, as a driver. But Tyler Reddick seems like that guy who you can, week in and week out, you expect him to be there at the finish. And since the All-Star race out in North Wilkesboro, he has finished outside the top 10 just once, which was a 22nd place finish at Iowa. And second worst finish in that time has been 8th. So he's had 7 top 5s, 10 top 10s. He's been on a tear. 2311's been hot all summer. Bubba Wallace last year, he went on a tear in the summer, so could just be that 2311, maybe they just prefer warmer weather because they are really, really starting to put things together just in time for the playoffs.
Yeah,
and
Bubba's he's really got to tighten it up at the end here. He really loves to hang around that bubble. And I keep saying that because I keep thinking of the NCAA basketball tournament. Teams that barely get in. He's just right on that playoff cusp. It's going to be tough, but he just got to really put in his time, put in 2 good races, and try to get in that final slot. It's going to be a tough stretch for a lot of great drivers trying to fight for those last places.
It really is. And there are some guys who are outside of the playoff bubble right now that I think deserve a little mention. And that's pretty much the 2 other drivers of Spire, Carson Hocevar and Zane Smith. Those cars, they have a partnership with Trackhouse Racing.
Yeah.
Zane Smith, he has 2 top 10s, and he has that runner-up finish at Nashville, where Joey Logano was able to stretch his fuel 100 laps. Carson Hocevar, keep in mind this is their first 2 full seasons for the both of them.
So young.
We have some young talent.
They're very young.
Watching these guys come in and compete, and when I thought it was weird in 2014 when I was seeing guys like Austin Dillon, Kyle Larson come in that 2014 class, and then now we're getting a brand new generation of drivers, Zane Smith and Carson Hocevar. Carson Hocevar basically jumped the Xfinity Series. He went from trucks, where he was in the Final Four last year. He only raced 5 Xfinity races in his career, and he already has 4 top 10s with a 10th place finish last week at Michigan. So things at Spire are looking pretty good.
Yeah, and he's been good too, because he's just comes off as a really good personality too. He's a good media darling at some points. He's got that baby face going for him.
He's a young dude. Some people can have their opinions about him, but I'm a big Carson Hocevar guy. I think he's going to be, if he can mature as a driver a little bit, I think he's going to have a long career in NASCAR. Hendrick, like we said, the biggest guy I want to highlight at Hendrick was William Byron. He looked like he was right back at it, hitting the ground running after last year's Final Four appearance. This year, he starts the first 8 races with 3 wins, including the Daytona 500, in a close finish over Alex Bowman. But since that race at Martinsville, he's not won. It looked like he was just having a very lull summer. So to be competing there at the win, for the win at the end, even if it was because of overtime, he was still in second before that, and he led that second overtime to green. So William Byron could be getting back into shape for the playoffs, and I don't think it's any sort of hot take to expect Hendrick drivers to make a lot of noise come playoff time.
They always got a lot of talent, man. You could always count on that, and it's going to be, of course, some tough sledding to always try to to get over that hump if you're one of the smaller teams. Sometimes you could see yourself as an underdog, but either way, it's making for a lot more drama, and I'm hopeful, as you are as well. It's starting to just get some other people in NASCAR latching onto those teams, whether again you just want to go for some of the Hendrick guys, some of the old standbys, or maybe you want to latch on to one of these younger guys. It's a really good mix out there.
Yeah, there are a lot of guys, a lot of young talent, which I feel don't get as much love. Guys like Todd Gilliland, he's 20th in points right now. He's had his up and downs, but this last weekend obviously didn't help him when your tire blows out and you get wrapped up in a Kyle Larson crash. It doesn't bode too well for you.
Just again, it's just the luck factor that comes into any type of sport, but obviously it can really have an adverse effect in NASCAR. You can see yourself go from top 5 to last place and snap a finger, blink of an eye, whatever. It can happen so fast.
That's what happened to Denny Hamlin, racing for the lead. One spin basically took his chances of winning away. And we go to a track where position and timing is everything at Daytona. So we look ahead to that with the championship bubble race, just about as tight as it can be. Truex, even though he did have an off day with that finish, he had a great day, bad finish, unfortunately. He's pretty much, I would say, locked in. Just on points, he would need to be absolutely terrible, probably last place finishes at Daytona and Darlington, but I don't see that happening.
No, it would have to be disastrous.
He would have to have a perfect storm to knock him out of the playoffs in his final full-time season. I keep wanting to say Chase just because that's what I grew up on.
I do. I know. Everything's different. Just got to have that proper terminology.
So Ty Gibbs, another young driver in his second year, still looking for win number 1. Ended up bringing it home third. at Michigan, and he's now 39 points above the cut line. But after that, and going into Daytona, points are going to be they're going to be hard fought over there. So you can see a lot of, normally at these restrictor plate tracks, or these pack racing tracks like Talladega and Daytona, you'll see guys, they'll kind of half throttle it, say to get more fuel efficiency. I think they're going to be at the cut line. These guys who are, Ross Chastain, 1 point above the cut line. Bubba Wallace, 1 point below it. Buescher is only 16 points above the cut line. I think these guys are going to be battling for every point next week in the stage. But there is a lot that can go wrong at Daytona. But it's going to be interesting because Daytona's, at least recently, since I believe about 2020, Daytona's been the cutoff race, and now they have Daytona and then the Southern 500 at Darlington, which is now the cutoff race. So I don't know how aggressive that lets you be at Daytona, because you obviously have, it's a wild card race, anything can happen, but you can throw a Hail Mary, and if it doesn't work out, you better hope you're good at Darlington to make up for it. But there was a lot of playoff implications in the race at Michigan in just one crash, really. Kyle Larson's, we keep going back to that, but knocking out Gilliland. Briscoe had a bad day. Wallace was involved in that crash. A lot of these guys at the cut line, they made some of these guys must-wins, basically, in these next two races. Briscoe especially, Gilliland. Busch, he's sadly looking like he's going to have to be winning in. Just too much bad luck. But, yeah, looking ahead to Daytona now, we have a few stats for you. So, the best average finish on Super Speedway since 2021, the top three drivers have been Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, and Bubba Wallace.
Okay.
Bubba.
I'm actually surprised to hear Bubba's name in there. I mean, I know he's been solid, but surprised just with that group.
Oh, yeah. Ryan Blaney, obviously, champion. He has 2 wins on Super Speedways, including, I believe they're both at Talladega.
Okay.
An average finish of 13.1. Chase Elliott, 2 former champions in that top 3. Average of 13.5 with a Talladega win. And Bubba Wallace sitting up there at 14.9. And to keep going along with that, Bubba Wallace is, since at Daytona since 2021, for a driver who has started every race since then at Daytona, Bubba Wallace is first in average finish, finishing with 9.9. Alex Bowman, the Daytona 500 runner-up, he has a 13.3. And surprisingly, Corey LaJoie is third. So we could see a massive shakeup in the playoffs if Corey LaJoie manages to go from a season where he's talked about for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, just all those tough crashes.
Ends up winning.
Yeah, so you never know, and it's the type of racetrack where you could see crazy things like that happen. Because again, this is just going to be another one of those situations where even if you're not really into NASCAR, you still know Daytona, or you've heard of the Daytona 500, or you've just popped it on TV because you know it's just one of those big races. And closing out the season here, it's going to be a real tight finish. Drivers who might be willing to risk a little bit more, especially at that cut line. It's so tight right now. Got 1 point in either direction between Chastain and Wallace, so should be a fun time.
Yeah, and at tracks like this, it's really just about who survives more so than who's the fastest.
Yeah, keep your car on the track. Yeah, keep your car functional.
One thing I forgot to mention when talking about Tyler Reddick, but it does look back to Bubba Wallace. There is supposedly a McDonald's curse in NASCAR.
McDonald's curse,
so,
okay.
Yeah, so Mr. Excitement in 1994, Jimmy Spencer, he won at Talladega. Between then, there was not another car sponsored by McDonald's to win until Bubba Wallace in 2021 at Talladega. And you think about the drivers that have sponsored, or have been sponsored by McDonald's, where you have Bill Elliott, Hall of Famer, Kurt Busch, to go that long, I believe it was over 9,000 days without a win.
That's crazy, especially just because some of those names, and obviously McDonald's, they've had their hands in NASCAR for a long time.
For a long time, a lot of iconic cars, Bill Elliott especially, that is obviously not watching racing in the 90s, considering I was not born.
Yeah, no.
The car I was most familiar with Bill Elliott driving was the red McDonald's car. So
Gotta love those fries.
but this was with Tyler Reddick winning McDonald's, or with McDonald's on the hood at Michigan. It is the first non-rain shortened race since Jimmy Spencer's win. So it has been a long, long time since Tyler Reddick has won, or since McDonald's has won. Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace doing it. So interesting that two teammates have been the ones to break that curse.
That's interesting, though, just making that push. And to get to this point, to see a little bit of that shakeup, especially at this point of the season, we are really just getting down to it here. And just being able to start this podcast and, again, talk about this while things are just getting really hype. And I'm really getting back into it. This is fun. This is a good time. And I'm hoping it is for, anyone really trying to get back into the sport, or maybe you've been a fan for a long time. Either way, take all kinds here.
Yeah. Tyler Reddick, a lot of these guys, these young guys, Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, Carson Hocevar, we were talking about. A lot of these guys, and if you go back a little further, Kyle Larson, who's widely considered one of the best drivers on the planet right now.
Oh, God, he's so pesky. He's just, I feel like that guy's always towards the front. It's like, come on, man. It's like, how are you, just this solid in some races?
In Hendrick equipment, he seems very much, he's earned the title of checkers or wreckers, basically. He's up at the front, or he's wrecking while trying to win.
Really, though? Like no doubt about it. There's no better way to put it.
Yeah, but speaking of checkers or wreckers, this would be much more of an interesting set, I feel, in a season-long championship. But Christopher Bell, and widely considered one of his best seasons, if not his best season of his career, driving for Joe Gibbs. He has 3 wins already, including a Coke 600 victory this year. He has 8 finishes of 30th or worse, and yet he's in the career year because of this playoff system. So if you think about how that would work out in the Ladford system, the old Winston format, he might not even be someone to talk about. It's just a guy who's managed to win 3 races and a Coke 600, which obviously nothing to sneeze at with Crown Jewel.
No, not at all.
An interesting fact that Christopher Bell, though Kyle Larson's earned the title of a checkers or wreckers guy, Christopher Bell has had some severe consistency issues, whether it be the fault of his own or not. As we look ahead to Daytona, with a track as unpredictable as that, making any predictions for it as to who's going to win is basically just sticking your hand in a bag of names and pulling one out.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It really is something tough to decipher when you're going down that road. Yet again, you don't have to know that much about racing to just know, or even just a minimal research. It is just a tough track. Obviously every racetrack has, sometimes they have their nifty names, or a little bit more of that NASCAR lore of history, but Daytona is right up there at the top, and it could be just a really tough one to take hold of.
Yeah, and even some of the best guys to race on super speedways and pack racing like this, it doesn't ensure anything, because I don't think it would be too far of a leap to say Denny Hamlin is one of the best super speedway racers in NASCAR history, and he's yet to win at a super speedway since this new gen car was implemented. So he has 3 Daytona 500 wins, but he's never won the summer race at Daytona.
So in my opinion, though, that could be a point of reference to perhaps think he's due.
Yeah, he could be due. Kyle Busch hasn't won at Daytona since 2008, but he did win Talladega, the spring race last year. So he's not to be overlooked at these super speedway races, especially Richard Childress. They've shown their ability to win. Obviously, of course, Dale Earnhardt back in the day, if you say who's the best super speedway racer, it's Dale Earnhardt or Dale Earnhardt Jr. And then you could have a long gap, and then probably Denny Hamlin there.
Throw some other names in there, yeah.
But I think Richard Childress, they know what's at stake for them, and Kyle Busch as a whole, his career as a whole. I think he has a good shot of winning. But as for a prediction on who's going to win, all signs point to Bubba Wallace at least being competitive. So of course I'm going to choose. I'm going to go for the chaos option. I think Austin Dillon is going to find a way to ruin
Austin
everything.
Dillon. Oh man, a lot of people not be happy about that with everything that's gone on over the past couple of weeks. Okay.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be some long shot. Maybe not a long shot guy because at Daytona anybody's a long shot, but he's shown he's won this track or won at this track twice. He's won a 500. He's won the summer race. He's just. I feel like the chaos factors there this season has been so off the rails, which is great for the sport, I would say. But I think that this Austin Dillon winning Daytona just to fully push home that win and in system when he's back in around the 30s in points, it could shake everything up, and that whole Richmond debate would be for nothing. So I feel like that would just be so very fitting for this this season that's been as well as it has been.
Yeah, especially in recent memory. It's going to be something that comes down in a really tough sense here. And that's, of course, something that would be catastrophic to the playoff bubble. That would, pop that, of course, right then and there. Same thing, of course, if, Busch happened to have a really good run here. Strictly going off of what I've been seeing in recent memory, I really do like how, even though, I've gone over things and I'm still just really trying to get a better grasp of, how the cars have been running, how things have been, going from earlier points in the season to this point. But my pick, at least as of right now, I think I would have to slide Byron into the favor of having the win, and if not at a very close finish or possibly getting it, just Hamlin, just because of the point of to say that he's due, and he's been pretty solid all year. So those would be my one, if not two, very close picks for that win. That's what I would slot in there personally.
So William Byron, in that prediction, would sweep Daytona. I would have to look at the stats on when the last time a driver swept both races.
Hey, we like crazy, right?
That would be a good way to break that summer slump he's been in.
There you go.
So, and like we said, won the 500. Hendricks, known for their Daytona wins, of course, back with Junior, Gordon, Johnson. That success has not really gone anywhere. I think, as for a bold prediction of what will happen during the race, I have a feeling that we're going to see yet another airborne crash. We saw one with Ryan Preece last year, obviously not hoping to see something like that, but with all that's on the line and the bubble as tight as it possibly can be, 1 point separating who's in and who's not, I think guys are going to get aggressive. Guys who want to win, guys who need to win for whatever reason. I think things might get crazy. If we see a car in the air or upside down next week, I wouldn't be too surprised.
Yeah, no, you'll be seeing some bump drafts out there, guys being a little bit more aggressive, especially towards the end, especially if you're someone who is just really on the outside looking in and you have a potential chance to win or at least, get really close to it. Probably going to be trying to be aggressive out there. Hopefully, guys are still being smart. You're not trying to send anyone back into the track or into the wall. But this is going to be something where, it really gets intense. Got 2 races to go, and 2 very famous racetracks between the very and ever so difficult Daytona 500 and, of course, the track that's too tough to tame, Darlington, coming up right after.
Yeah, so moving on to just some quick news around the sport. Of course, we had the unfortunate passing of Scott Bloomquist, a dirt racing legend, a mentor to Tyler Reddick.
It's tough, man. Tough news, but really nice dedication by him, though.
Absolutely. Sadly passes away at the age of 60. News from just a few hours ago, as of the time of recording this, Austin Dillon's first round of appeals was upheld, so the ruling stands. He keeps the win. Does not get the immediate playoff berth, but his spotter will get his suspension reduced from 3 races to 1 race, and Richard Childress Racing has announced that they will appeal again, but this will be the last time that they can. This will be the final circle.
Now, will his spotter be back for Daytona or for Darlington?
I would imagine, since he was already suspended this past week, he would be back for Daytona.
He'll be back, okay.
But I would have to double check on that. William Sawalich, 17-year-old in ARCA, just absolutely destroying the competition. Led every lap of the Illinois State Fairgrounds race. But I brought that up because I thought you would love this stat. Venturini Motorsports makes history They have the first 2 women to finish in the top 5 in the series history at the same time, that being Isabella Robusto and Taylor Ramier, both of them finishing in a podium, 2nd and 3rd place.
Now, again, just to clarify, this is dirt tracks?
No, this is the ARCA series.
Oh, this is the ARCA series?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so it's interesting. These little fun facts.
And sadly, another thing that came out just before we recorded today, the Rusty Wallace driving experience posted on their website. They will be shutting down operations. So I know a lot of people have experience with going to a track and getting to sit passenger side in these stock cars ripping around these tracks. So I know when I was younger, I went with my aunt to Pocono Raceway. Got to witness that. I was too young to ride at the time. I was 13.
I was going to say, yeah, especially with that tricky triangle.
Yeah, so sad to see that. I know a lot of people have good memories of that. And also, the last thing, announcer Rick Allen, at least for the moment, has called his final Cup Series race. I believe he'll finish through the Xfinity Series. But Lee Diffie, he is the Indy 500 announcer. And he called at the Olympics.
Oh wow! Okay, so he's got a lot of great broadcasts under his belt.
Very, very legendary voice in broadcast. He will be joining NASCAR, and what better way to start off your NASCAR repertoire right there than a Daytona, Coke 400. With berth to the playoffs possibly on the line.
Yeah, I know. There's going to be so many things here as we settle on in, and it will be very interesting as we get onto this race, especially because we talked about this before the podcast, everything that goes on down in Florida this time of the year from a scientific standpoint, from a weather standpoint. And for those who don't know, hopefully you've got to this point of the podcast, I'm a meteorologist, all right? So, this is something that definitely fascinates me. Weather is a big factor in NASCAR, and this time of the year, when you're seeing that part of Florida, right off the coast, ocean water temperatures are in the mid-80s, which means you're going to be having a very volatile air mass up above that ocean water, and you're going to just have those pop-up spotty thunderstorm chances all the time. So it's going to be, of course, it can be hit and miss, but it easily is going to be something that can impact this race as we get towards, almost the final. It will be the final full weekend in August, but again, that ocean water temperature very warm. You know how Florida is. It is hot. It is muggy, and it is going to be something to be mindful of, as it could be delaying this race, and of course it can be a big factor for the road conditions. So that's going to be something fans really need to watch out for. And in terms of just any other drama or factors that go into this playoff race, it's going to be there.
Yeah, and we've seen the Daytona 500 I believe that was 2012, that was delayed by weather, and it put the Daytona 500 into a primetime slot, which was that race by itself was incredible. But now with the summer race, the Coke 400, or at least whatever it has, I believe it's the Coke 0400 at Daytona. That
I think you're correct. If I'm not mistaken. I know these sponsors change every now and again.
Yeah. This race it's set to start Saturday night at around 7. So if there's any weather delay there, we could be looking at a very late race, but it wouldn't be unfamiliar to Daytona. So I think that would just raise the stakes that much higher if we get maybe a 10 p.m. start and just get going, racing well past midnight.
Oh, man, that's why you got lights, I guess.
Yep, and Daytona under the lights, I will take that any day of the week.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, I feel like there's just no better racing experience. It's the same thing, in my opinion, with a lot of sports, with, playoff baseball at night, football games at night, especially college football, NASCAR racing at night. It's just, I don't know, something special.
It really is. But now we head into our final turn. We had some interesting news coming out of a NASCAR schedule leak on Twitter. This was reported by Adam Stern of the Sports Business Journal. A tweet was deleted. It was sent but deleted, or I guess X'd, however you use that as an action.
So I've heard people call it Twix now too.
Twix,
like the candy bar,
or Zeets. I've also heard.
Whatever you want to call it.
It was deleted by NASCAR Latino, which is the Spanish social media for NASCAR. This schedule, of course, we already have the confirmed racetrack for the Clash, the weekend of the first weekend in February at Bowman Gray. So we get to see the Clash that was out in LA for a couple years now move to its hometown roots in Bowman Gray Stadium, which is a track. Ironically, we have a track that is known for drivers beating and banging on each other. It's going to be real interesting to see how Cup drivers handle that track.
But a little closer to us.
Oh, yes, of course.
Which is cool.
North Carolina in the winter should be fun.
Oh, man, yeah, I know. It's, always grab a jacket. We'll be fine. Again, we lived in the Northeast for 20 plus some years. We'll be fine. It's in our DNA to not get too cold.
Plus, any chance I get to see that first exhibition race, I would be happy to sit down in the cold for that. Even though part of me still wishes it was full speed weeks at Daytona, I'm excited to see how they do on a local track.
Who knows? Maybe they'll get some flurries.
Oh, that would be interesting. I don't know if we've ever had a snow delay in NASCAR before.
It's a possibility, especially that part of North Carolina. It is very much a possibility. Or even a little ice in February. Come on. It's right on that. It's a sweet spot between North Carolina and Virginia for ice storms that time of the year. It's definitely possible.
I can only imagine them putting on snow tires on those cars.
We'll see.
Speaking of weather, though, we have Sonoma. Apparently, this is going off the unconfirmed leak, of course. But Sonoma moving to a July race, which I think is not a very smart idea. California in July is just California in July.
Yeah,
if I had a say in it, I would say go the old Riverside route, which was back in the day, Tony. This was before both of us were born. There was a track in Riverside. It was called Riverside in California. They would race that the week before the Daytona 500, so that would actually kick off the NASCAR season. And I think we should go there for Sonoma first week one, kind of throwing it back to Riverside. Also, California that time of year is all green, and Sonoma, as we know it, is just all sand. So I think it would be a really cool scene to see racing through Sonoma week one with grassy fields up there.
Oh yeah, the visuals are fantastic, and that's the thing too with just some of these NASCAR broadcasts just over the course of the past season. With I can't really stress it enough. Just getting into this time is just the excitement, in my opinion, is building. You're seeing a lot better, just some graphic design from people in these broadcasts. You got the street races in these cities. There's just a lot of different factors that are trying to bring in a lot of different fans. You're giving a lot of these great visuals from camera angles, from drone footage, which is possible now, and it all looks great. And I think that a lot of different broadcast companies are doing a pretty good job with these races, and making it pleasant for the fan at home.
We have for the moment the All-Star race stays in North Wilkesboro, so we are staying for the exhibition races. It will be an all Carolina showing for NASCAR.
Gotta love that.
Getting back to the roots there, which is always great. I am hoping, maybe it's just a pipe dream, but I am hoping and praying that they are staying at North Wilkesboro, waiting on it to give it a points race until they renovate Rockingham. I love Rockingham, those old races. A lot of them are up on YouTube. Rockingham was such a classic track that they stopped going to. Fell into disrepair, but now that it's being cleaned up, I would love to see the Cup Series return there. And maybe go on a sort of how other sports alternate their all-star games, just through a cycle. So there are so many unique tracks in this country, or even not in our country, where it would be cool to see these the stars of our sport go. So North Wilkesboro, a third year for the All-Star race. They said hoping that we get Rockingham at some point, but we'll see. The big one, the big leak, if this is to be true, Mexico City, NASCAR returning to international tracks, and that would be for a points-paying race.
Yeah, going down over the border. That's going to be an interesting one. And it is a nice thing when they try to get a lot of these big events or other sports into other countries where you're trying to maybe take hold and grow your fan base a little bit. Like the Philadelphia Eagles, Green Bay Packers, NFL. They're playing in Sao Paulo, Brazil this season. It's, just a little bit of something different, a different flavor, and you're trying to present something to people in other parts of the world who you have those fans.
Yeah, and we've seen great success with that. We've seen the Germany games. I believe they have games in Wembley in the UK
Yep.
for the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen a lot more of it you see a lot of it in football, and of course it's easier for other sports where you see going overseas. Obviously, there's a plenty big foothold for, sports like tennis and soccer, or obviously football over in Europe. But NASCAR, to actually see it try to expand a little bit, why not?
They used to race out in Australia and in Japan back in the 80s and 90s, I believe. So it's cool. It would be cool to see NASCAR going back to their international tracks. We have Richmond losing a date, which is at the time of this announcement is kind of disappointing because we saw those soft tires that they had at Richmond and the drama that Austin Dillon found himself in. Richmond was a great race once they put those soft tires on, so it's sad to see them lose a date. But with this short track package, we kind of saw it coming.
Sorry, Virginia.
They have Martinsville twice. They're all right.
It is a state for lovers, but they might not love you, Richmond, I guess. I don't know.
Charlotte Roval is unfortunately still a thing. People love it. Apparently, it's a great fan experience. With how these cars race at 1.5 mile tracks, I would just like to see the return to the fall Charlotte date. But if the fans love the Roval, then I guess keep it coming. Talladega is interestingly, it was in the round of 12 for the playoffs. It is now the round of 8. So a winner at Talladega going into the championship 4 could be decided on what we saw for Tyler Reddick's first win. That insane crash that saw him in victory lane. We could see something like that with a trip to the championship 4 on the line, which is still being held in Phoenix, at least for another year. I would like to see that return to Homestead, but everybody and their mother on social media has pretty much made the same voice on that.
And you can count on dry weather in Phoenix, at least.
Well, unless you look at Dale Jr.'s last win. Where
the deluge of rain. Yeah, I know. It happens. It's just, exceptionally unlikely.
I would just be very worried of the chance of a NASCAR champion being determined by who stayed out when there's rain on the way. That would be very unfortunate for the sport.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And sticking with the playoffs, Watkins Glen, we haven't even gotten there yet for the playoffs. It's already out, so I'd assume that had something to do with the Olympic scheduling, which is the same reason why the Southern 500 is it's usually the first race of the playoffs. It is now the cutoff race this year. That's going back to normal next year.
Which is cool, though.
At least if the schedule if the schedule is true that was leaked. We're getting one round of Darlington cutoff and one round of Watkins Glen in the playoffs, and then back to how it was with Daytona being the cutoff race. And there's no race on Easter as well, so they'll be going back from an Easter break to Talladega. So always great to come back from a break to go right to a track headache like Talladega is.
Oh, yeah, right. I was going to say, but it's, I suppose, nice, maybe spend a little bit of time with, family and friends, especially centered around a holiday like that, get a little bit of a break, and then, just maybe time to have a bit of a breather and try to close things out strong. And getting to, a name of a track like that, just a little bit more of a good transition, I would say, as we go forward.
It's probably a good thing to have a moment to catch your breath before going to Talladega in the spring.
Yeah, such a recognizable name and track like that, obviously from a driver or fan standpoint.
But yeah, that's about it. Going to Daytona with a trip to the playoffs on the line, so we'll be seeing drivers do all sorts of things, I'm sure. I don't think it'll just be going crazy for the win. I think we're going to see some great racing for stage points, stage wins. Tyler Reddick trying to hold on to that lead now for the regular season championship with 15 bonus points on the line for the playoffs. Denny Hamlin, who knows what he'll do. Maybe he'll help one of his drivers. Maybe try to get Bubba Wallace in. Maybe try to get Ty Gibbs his first win. We'll see where his priorities lie. But we've seen him be aggressive, so he could just be searching for another win. I can't fault a man for being aggressive if he's gone this long without winning a championship. I'm sure he'd be willing to do anything to get there.
Yeah, and it's going to be just a lot of the wave of power struggle here. Whether it's going to be guys just fighting for the top, wanting that win, or, of course, the ever so tight playoff bubble waiting to pop for a lot of drivers as we're, just getting down the stretch here. It's going to be a very fun race under the lights in Daytona, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of juicy details to talk about. After all is said and done, the dust has settled, and we continue to look forward.
Yep, and then right into from the night race at Daytona to the Lady in Black for the Southern 500. So big races to decide how this championship field is, or this playoff field is set up.
How convenient that we close it out right here in good old South Carolina. So we'll, of course, have a lot to discuss as we look ahead to next week. Yet again, as a reminder, I'm Tony. He's Adam. This is the Palmetto Pitstop podcast. Thank you so much for stopping on by for your pit. We'll be back next time.